Hey, Leadership 201, and welcome to what is our last video on the Spring 2020 lecture series. So I know on eCampus, our initial topic for today's lecture was going to be a combination of gender and culture, how it actually impacts leadership. And as you may know, that was kind of two separate chapters in the Northhouse textbook. And actually, our department chair here in Leadership Studies was so kind enough to actually make a lecture on gender and leadership for us to view, which is actually already available for you on the eCampus course shell. I'd like to think that she's one of the foremost experts in gender and leadership, as she's really dedicated a lot of her work to advancing gender and leadership, and is in the process of writing a textbook and has done a lot of really cool things around that. So I think that that lecture is best served coming from her. So that's made available for you on eCampus. And if you have any questions about that, by all means, go ahead and ask me. I'd be more than happy to talk about some more of those concepts. But really today, I just wanted to focus mainly on the cultural aspect of that, just due to some of my own personal experience and work talking about international business and also just leadership from a cultural aspect. I think it's really important that we as leaders, have the sensitivity to understand a lot about how cultures interact and how everybody with different cultures really come together to form, a really unique community and unique organizations. So today we're really going to kind of dive into some of the really basics of that. And first, I'll give you some general definitions of what culture is and how leadership interacts with that. And we'll talk about some of the related cultures and a lot of the really important work that's been done around culture and organizations. We'll talk about dimensions of culture from based off of some of the work of an individual by the name of Hofstede. We'll talk about world culture and kind of general and how some of these characteristics come together. And we'll talk about some of these universally desirable and undesirable leadership attributes that every culture seems to really, take the time to, have these general concepts of what leadership really looks like. And ultimately, we'll talk about culture and leadership. So let's go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, culture and leadership really focuses on a collection of related ideas instead of just one single theory. So as per usual, this is really just kind of a supplement to a lot of what we have worked on. So what is really important to understand is that we live in what we call a globalized economy, and globalization, which is really kind of the practice of business and organizations having presence in a lot of different lights. It really has increased in our society since World War II, and we have this heavy interdependence between nations in both an economic, political, very social context. So really think about maybe even today when we look at the COVID-19 response and how globalization has impacted that, and how not only are we responding to a lot of things that are happening locally, but we need to have more of a global understanding of how the disease is affecting us. And a lot of the times businesses kind of use this mantra, which is, think globally, act locally. So it's a pretty unique concept, and how we really got to think about the global impact of our organizations and our leadership decisions as well. And globalization in itself has created many different challenges for us, and really has first and foremost created this need to, design multinational organizations and really identify and select leaders for these organizations, and that are culturally sensitive and have an appreciation for managing organizations with very culturally diverse employees. So really, an individual by the name of Adler Bartholomew back in 1992 made up these 5 cross-cultural competencies for leaders to really possess. And these are kind of the foreground for a lot of work that has been performed on the ideas of culture and leadership. And the first tenet really is understanding business, political, and cultural environments worldwide. Really having an understanding and appreciation for not only how business and commerce works in the United States, but other countries, and really understanding how different political environments can actually have an impact on how we work in organizations. Also, it's really important to have a cultural appreciation where we understand the perspectives, the tastes, the trends and technologies of cultures. Some places are a lot more advanced than we are, some are a lot less advanced, and we have to have an appreciation for how culture, how history has impacted a lot of the perspectives that these cultures actually possess. From there too, it's really important to be able to work simultaneously from people from other cultures. Having that unified vision while also having appreciation for other cultures and bringing them into the organization is essential. And also from there too, we need to be able to adapt to living and communicating in other cultures. So having this global ability to put ourselves in other cultures and have an appreciation and a sensitivity for those cultures and having that ultimate respect for the other cultures is important too. And then number five, the last one really is the need to learn to relate to people from other cultures from a position of equality rather than superiority. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but some countries tend to have more of a um, centrism towards their own, very certain countries are very centric towards their own people and kind of their own way, thinking that their own way is the best way. And especially in leadership, we have to really focus on the fact that that's not true. And I mean, every country, every person, every human life really has their own value, and we're all equal in that sense. So it's important that leaders, we treat that with respect and appreciation, that everybody brings something unique to the table based on their culture, based on their cultural background. So it's very important that leaders lead from a position of equality and not superiority when it comes to the cultural dimension that they're working with. So, kind of jumping back, what is culture? And culture really is a learned belief, values, rules, norms, symbols, traditions that are common to a group of people, whether that's a locality, a country, an ethnic background. Culture really is unique because it takes the form of a lot of these traditions and things, and it's very common knowledge to that group. From the outside it may seem a little bit different, and these are all shared qualities of a group of individuals that make them unique, and for them it's really a way of life. It's how they live their life, and it's very important to them. So having an appreciation for culture, I mean, everybody has culture even within organizations. We talk a lot about organizational culture, and some terms that are really related to culture though is multicultural, which is really an approach or a system that takes more than one culture into account. And I like to think of an organization like WVU. We have a lot of very diverse cultural backgrounds coming into this larger collective unit, which is WVU, where we have our own culture in itself, but we're very multicultural in the sense that we have a respect and bring in people from many different walks of life, and also have a diversity, which is the existence of different cultures within a group or an organization. And I think WVU does a really good job on our diversity and inclusion efforts. And diversity is something really important within organizations, and something especially in my area, kind of the HR field. It's very important that we make sure we have diverse organizations and promote diversity, because diverse thought ultimately is what can provide a competitive advantage for an organization. So kind of jumping back to that, we talk about the concept of ethnocentrism, and really what ethnocentrism is really the tendency for an individual to place their own group, ethnic, racial, or cultural at the center of their observations of the world, and perception that one's culture is better than more natural than other cultures, and really is kind of this universal tendency for each of us to believe that we are ethnocentric in some way. Whether you think about it or not, you're still more accustomed and more centric towards your own values and more your people. It's more likely to be supportive of somebody that is within your own circle and kind of understands the norms and the values that you already possess. I mean, even more of a lighthearted example, think about it. If you as a WVU graduate, you're going to be accustomed to some of the norms that we provide here in our culture at WVU. And if you kind of see, maybe you have a Pitt grad and a WVU grad both asking for a job in your organization, we're more likely to probably favor the WVU alum, just because we have kind of that centrism towards our own culture. And obviously, besides that, Pitt is another story. But ethnocentrism on a more serious note does occur, and it's really important for leadership because it can be a really big obstacle to how we effectively lead, because it really prevents us from understanding and respecting other cultures with the merit that it truly deserves. With ethnocentrism really also comes the idea of prejudice as well, which is really that um, fixed attitude, belief, or emotion that's held by an individual about another individual or group. And a lot of times prejudice is based on faulty or unsubstantiated data, which leads us to really make these inflexible generalizations that are resistant to change and also resistant to actually new evidence. So leaders that face prejudice and dealing with their own prejudice, you know, they can hold a lot of these prejudices towards uh, a leader or a leader's culture, and they can also face their followers who represent culturally different groups, and they could have their own prejudice towards one another. So it's really important to not only understand your privilege but your prejudice too as a leader. And a skilled leader really needs to find a way to negotiate with followers from various cultural backgrounds without really bringing prejudice to the table. So now that we talked about some of the definitions and core concepts around that, let's just play some ado here to the dimensions of culture. So back in 1976, Hall was kind of one of the first people on the scene when talking about culture and leadership. And Hall really reported that a primary characteristic of cultures is a degree of focus on the individual around the group. So really kind of identifying these two dimensions, which we call the individualistic and then the collectivistic dimensions. From there, Trompenaars back in 1994 classified an organization's culture into two different dimensions. So we talked about the egalitarian versus hierarchical degree. So basically seeing how power flows in the organization, whether do we share it or do we have more of the traditional hierarchical structure. And then we also have the person orientation to task orientation, which is pretty similar to a lot of what we talked about in this course when it comes to task and relationship-based behaviors. So basically, this is the extent to which cultures emphasize human interaction versus focusing on the task in hand. So Hofstede actually, it's very important to talk about Hofstede's work, because Hofstede really has had a lot of impact on how we look at culture and leadership in organizations, especially. And Hofstede really benchmarked the research idea and then identified these five major dimensions on which cultures differ. So from that, an individual by the name of House and a group of people that worked with him really took some of Hofstede's work and looked at the relationship between culture and leadership, which made this study called the Globe Study. And the Globe Study is one of the most important studies out there in terms of leadership and cultural leadership today, and still is an active program. And really, the Globe study initiated in 1991, and really it took a lot of quantitative methods to really study all these managers and organizations across many cultures. And through that, they developed 9 cultural dimensions, a lot of them which rely on the work of Hofstede, which is displayed a little bit more in your textbook too, which I would highly recommend reading over. So the 9 cultural dimensions that were identified by the Globe study was the first one, uncertainty avoidance. So uncertainty avoidance is really the extent to which a society or group relies on these established social norms and rituals to avoid uncertainty. So certain things, like for example, the United States has a high culture of entrepreneurship, where countries like the Middle East really rely on careful business negotiations that have been about long-term relationships. So businesses that have been around for a long time, they're not really interested in exploring new opportunities as much. So kind of uncertainty avoidance is really the level to which a culture spends their time either wanting to kind of explore new things or kind of keeping it heavy traditional rooted in their system. So the next one is power distance, and that's really the degree to which a member of a group expect and agree that power should be shared unequally. So basically, we have like all of the basis of power that we talked about from French and Raven's work, and this also kind of plays into what level is it prevalent to the culture in itself. And for example, in India, there's a caste system where everyone really has his or her rightful place. So everyone is, based on their background, has been kind of given this amount of authority in society. And also with that too, this kind of helps to define how hierarchical or egalitarian some of the structures and organizations can also be. And so to kind of build off that too, some of the next cultural dimensions are institutional collectivism. And that really is the degree to which an organization or society encourages institutional or societal collective action. So basically, how together is a country in terms of, how they operate. And for example, a really extreme one is, North Korea in Kim Jong-un, which is, utilizing military to oversee development of cultural values and collective effort and non-material incentives. So having a high level of collectivism typically is conducive to more of a communistic society. Um, so, we have a relatively moderate to low institutional collectivism in the United States, because although we do kind of have some of those patriotic and overarching country-based values, we still have independence as well. So another one is in-group collectivism. So that's really the degree to which people express pride, loyalty, and cohesiveness in their organizations or families. For some example, Middle Eastern cultures really regard family or religious affiliation above anything else. Um, in the past, it's led to things like honor killings who have disgraced or defied really the paternal leader of the family. So that really kind of shows how tight and how cohesive an organization is, and how they really express their loyalty as one of the cultural dimensions. So either it could be high or low on that. The next one is gender egalitarianism. So really, the degree to which organization or society minimizes gender role differences and promotes gender equality. So in a country like Sweden, they're very egalitarian when it comes to gender. Everyone really shares power equally. Everything is very equal in Sweden. And really kind of an extensive system really allows both sexes to balance work and family life. Whereas other places, you still see a very large gap between the ability of what men and women can do in the workplace. And United States, although we do have a lot of gender egalitarianism, we still have our flaws, as you may be able to read in some of our gender and leadership chapters. So that's a really important and kind of hotly debated thing that we're doing better on as we speak in the United States. I personally feel like the next is assertiveness. So this is really the degree to which people in a culture, are assertive, confrontational, aggressive in their social relationships. A good example of this is in Germany. Managers are really straightforward and direct with their constituents, and you know, really conflict and this confrontational type of discussion style are very acceptable workplace behaviors. Whereas a country like the United States, although we are confrontational and pretty straightforward, we tend to beat around the bush a little bit when it comes to workplace behaviors and talking about things. So it is important to really have an appreciation for how assertive a cultures can be, and kind of think about how maybe some of the past political events and historical events of a culture has actually really created this level of assertiveness. The next one is future orientation. So really, the extent to which people really engage in future-oriented behavior, such as planning, investing in the future, and delaying gratification. So, really, for example, Middle Eastern countries, that type of the world, the Western world, uh, Eastern world, I'm sorry, really means that countries are concerned with really traditional values and ways of doing things. So they're really rooted in tradition, really kind of in the moment. Whereas a place like America, here we're very you know wanting to kind of control and change the future and vision the future. So kind of making those decisions that really allow for us to create a sake and change for the future. So having that future orientation being high or low on that is also unique for certain countries. Another one too is performance orientation. So really kind of the extent to which an organization encourages and rewards group members for improved performance and excellence. I think the US does a great job of being high on that in terms of the fact, especially in our business, we really value the idea of feedback as a way to drive results and performance ultimately. We also see that through our education system where we have standardized testing and among some other things too. So having a high performance orientation and continuously wanting to improve is another thing, one of the cultural dimensions. The last cultural dimension is what we call humane orientation. So really the degree to which a culture encourages rewards and people for being fair, altruistic, generous, caring, kind to others. So it really kind of depends on the country and kind of their humanity-based efforts. But like Switzerland, for example, offers help to others after the wars that we had back in the 1900s, and really the country espouses tolerance and responsibility as clear central educational goals. So kind of the bettering of humanity is one of their big missions in terms of their education system as well. So this kind of just a breakdown of some of the different areas and some of the clusters of culture in the world, and just some of the names for it. Kind of a unique example from your textbook that I pulled. But moving forward here, we have some of these different clusters of culture, and you can kind of see where some of this lies. So the cultural dimensions of assertiveness orientation. Europe is a lot more assertive, where Nordic Europe has a less movement of assertiveness. um, So it is pretty unique here, and you can kind of read more about them on your textbook. And just kind of to go over, some things like the Anglo people are very competitive and result oriented. And you can kind of go through this list. I'm not going to go through and read all of this to you, but you know, every culture really the idea of this possesses different things and kind of that makes who they are. Like for example, in Eastern Europe or Sweden and places like that lie, it's really forceful but supportive of coworkers and treat women with equality. And all of these really lead to unique leadership orientations and the ability to have to lead different ways to make sure that uh, everyone is being served. So as leaders, we have to make a lot of the times cultural decisions based around everyone on the table and how can we interact with people in a way that ultimately affords the best possible outcomes with our followers. So with the Globe Research Project, they really identified after doing a lot of these studies of the different dimensions and where countries lie on it, they identified these 6 global leadership behaviors as some ways that we, as leaders, can make sure that we're doing the best to interact with everybody appropriately. So, first is this charismatic and value based leadership. That really reflects the ability of a leader to inspire, motivate, and expect high performance from others based on a strongly held core value system. So, having those core values and making them known and bringing everybody around those core values to achieve a common goal is very important. Next is team orientation of leadership, which really emphasizes team building and a common purpose among team members to bring everybody together in terms of actually, being a team, being an organization, and bringing everybody around those goals is another way to do that. The next is participative leadership, which really reflects the degree to which leaders involve others in making decisions. So bringing everybody in and bringing everyone's cultural influences and backgrounds together to help make these leadership decisions is, very, very helpful in itself. Let me go back there. Sorry. The next one is humane oriented leadership. So this emphasizes being supportive, considerate, compassionate, and generous to everybody, no matter their cultural background. Another one too is autonomous leadership. So really the independent, individualistic leadership, which includes, a leader being autonomous and unique. And self-protective leadership also reflects behaviors that ensure the safety and security of the leader and the group. So some of the desirable leadership attributes that were as a result of the Globe study are things like a leader being trustworthy, having foresight, positivity, confidence building, intelligent, decisive, dynamic, motivational, dependable, honest. All of these things are kind of these universal truths that we see that every culture, no matter what, desires in their leader. And it's a great list to really help, look into your own leadership skills and see kind of what are some things that you possess or value that would be great to work in a cultural diverse environment. Now, also with the Globe study, there were some really key ones of undesirable leadership attributes that they announced as well, which are leaders that are like loners, kind of just going on their own, making their own decisions, leaders that are irritable, ruthless, non-social, not explicit about what they want, very dictatorial in the sense that they kind of just their way or the highway, very egocentric, having an egomania. So these are really some of the key things that we don't desire in leaders as well. So, like I said, culture is a very broad thing, and we encounter culture every single day, whether it be our own or whether it be some other cultures we interact with. But there are some strengths, to understanding culture as leadership, especially with the Globe studies. So, really, we look at the Globe study because it's still something to date that really helps analyze how leadership is viewed by cultures in all parts of the world. And I encourage you to actually go check out the Globe study online. There's a lot of great open source materials out about that. And these are really valuable because they come from really well-developed quantitative research designs and surveys. They've been making these surveys for a while. They've been perfecting them and really having countries from all over take them. And Globe studies really provide useful information about what is universally accepted as good and bad leadership. And really, this gives a lot of opportunities for us to understand what cross-cultural leadership can take shape as. And really, ultimately, the study of culture and leadership underscores the complexity of the leadership process and how culture can really have large influences. So, kind of moving forward, it's important to, as a leader to be cognizant of how culture can have impact on your followers and also you as a leader, understanding your own prejudices and where you come from and how some of the things that make you who you are in the leadership exchange can really have an impact on how you lead. So that's important as well. But Research really doesn't provide this really clear set of assumptions that can form a single theory about way culture really, relates to leadership. And, labels and definitions of cultural dimensions and leadership behaviors are somewhat vague, and they're difficult in times to interpret or fully comprehend the findings about culture and leadership in itself. And subsequent research about has really found that globe cultural dimensions are often contradictory of one another and don't really measure the same qualities at sometimes, but nonetheless, it's been a really great and time-tested piece of work that allows us to better understand, how leadership works in a cultural environment. Also, from there, the study really focuses on what people perceive to be leadership and ignores a lot of the theory that we've talked about. But really, an appreciation for culture as a whole is what the gist of my lecture is really trying to get at. So, really, applications here. Uh, the findings about culture can really help leaders understand their own cultural biases and preferences. We kind of circle back around to the beginning of our work on talking in the Dugan text about positionality and all of those great things um, that come with those lectures that we talked about. It's important to have understanding and appreciation for other people as well. And different cultures really have different ideas about what they want from their leaders. And these findings help our leaders as we adapt our styles and become more effective in different cultural settings. And these findings ultimately too can help global leaders communicate more effectively across certain cultures and geographic boundaries. So understanding how different cultures interact and how we can improve our own communication strategies is very important. And ultimately, at the end of the day, information on culture and leadership can use to be really help using cultural sensitivity and design new employee orientation and conduct programs and relocation training as well. So ultimately, culture is very important. It's understanding to have an appreciation for culture as well. So I hope this lecture kind of opened your eyes, maybe some of the things that other cultures perceive, and hopefully maybe you can use some of the dimensions as presented to help kind of assess your own cultural beliefs and cultural viewpoints as well. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed this lecture and thank you for participating in our online lecture series. And we'll be in touch soon. Have a great day.